You mentioned policies, and I can imagine if you're anything like us, you get asked like these really big questions, like how do we solve the problem, right?
Right.
Like how do you solve the racial wealth gap? And it's like,
yeah,
do all the things, right?
Yeah.
While you're not a policy expert or researcher, you have sort of dabbled in that space. Is there low-hanging fruit from a policy perspective or from a workplace perspective? I know you mentioned paid family leave. Are the things that you've identified as really low-hanging fruit that just kind of seems like a no-brainer that would really make the lives of caregivers easier?
Yes. I mean, I love this. Thank you for sharing this with me. It's just, I think we get really caught up in complicated solutions. Right. Or like answers, or it's so complicated, but it comes down to very basic things. And I mean, these things to me are human rights, right? To be able to provide for your family, to be able to live, just even like a simple life, to have health, to have shelter. And it's the really most shameful part of the United States is we tie basic human rights to having a job. Right? Like this concept of earning a living is such bullshit. I just reject that. Like I am alive, right? It really gets to these narratives these long held beliefs we have around deservedness. Who deserves money? Who deserves health? Who deserves security? And obviously in America, that's very tied to race. Like we are on occupied, stolen land. So we've already decided that Indigenous people do not deserve the land that they took care of for thousands of years, right? We built wealth on the backs of enslaved people, saying that they don't deserve to be paid for this labor, right? Like, and so those narratives really run deep. And I think people have to believe that somehow they deserve something more than people of color, right? Like white people really hold on to that. And I think that some of that stuff is so deep seated that people don't even know that that's what they're operating under. But from a policy standpoint, I love that you asked this question because I am a huge believer in a guaranteed income. I am a big believer in a universal basic income. And it gets to this. I believe that the only real work of humans is care work. That is keeping yourself and your people healthy and alive. Nothing else matters, really. Yeah. Right? Like everything else we've just sort of invented as a job. Right? And so, and I really think like without care work, without someone feeding you, nurturing you, sheltering you, like holding you, you will never make it into adulthood. You'll never make it past infancy. Right. And I think this idea, like keeping yourself alive is really hard work. And just ask Black mothers that, right? Ask trans people that. It is much harder for some of us to keep ourselves alive than it is for other people, right? And so a guaranteed income, which we're like one of the richest countries on earth. We pour so much money into a military budget. Like money is there if we want it, right? Like we could tax the rich. We could tax corporations, right? We could have this money and give people a floor for just a simple, like dignified, basic life. And, data is in like people, I find it really insulting when people say things, like if we give people money, like they're not going to work. Like I am out here working every day of my life. Like even if I do not want to work, my children wake up, like they need things, right? Like this stuff is work. Like it is just so, but the truth is we have data now. There are pilot programs for guaranteed income going on across the country. There's an organization called Mayors for Guaranteed Income. Like there are politicians who recognize this, right? Yeah. The data is in. Like 60% of guaranteed income goes to groceries. Like we can empower people to make choices that are best for them and their family, right? And also it's like not up to, like people can spend this money on most people spend this money on what they need, and they actually go and spend it in their community and they spread it in their community. So to me, that is like, it's the most basic thing you could imagine. And, yes. And I think like, it feels like a very like radical idea. Like people, when I talk about it with some people, like, especially like, not to generalize, but I've talked about it with some elders and their eyes are like, And I think there's an idea that like a lot of Americans are tied to this idea. Well, it was hard for me. I want it to be easier for other people. Like it doesn't have to be hard for everyone else. That to me is real progress, right? Is to make the world better and a little bit easier for other people. So they don't have to know that same sort of like humiliation and exhaustion.
Yes.
Yeah.
In chapter 9 of our book, we talk about the invaluable importance of community and how it's the key ingredient to achieving financial independence. Because when you have people you can share resources, experiences, and wisdom with, it makes the journey much easier to manage. The same is true for mothering. Hence the phrase, it takes a village.
But finding or building that village can be awkward. Honestly, children do a much better job at making friends than us adults do. So we asked Angela what her thoughts were on sharing the responsibility of mothering with others and how care work affects our careers. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Cashing Out the podcast. To see more videos like this, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and be sure to turn on your notifications. To get your copy of Cashing Out the book, visit Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore, or download the audiobook on Audible.